normal, some notes to mention that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. It's being conducted in accordance with the Council's remote meetings protocol and procedure rules. If you would like to speak, can I ask that you indicate by raising your virtual hand? Can I ask that the microphones are muted when not speaking? And the suggestion is that people's cameras are on. However, if it causes any disruption to sound or image, then please turn them off. We would normally vote by general assent, but as this evening is a one-item agenda, we will be voting by name call when we get to that point. Can I just check whether there are any apologies or substitute members? Jamie, have you had anything?
I've received apologies from Sue Butler.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm not aware of any substitutes unless anybody wants to declare anything. Okay, we'll go for declarations of interest. This is a slightly unusual agenda item in that I think this affects all members of the forum. It affects them differently, but I think we're all affected by the outcome. Paul, is there anything specifically we need to say on declarations?
No, not that I'm aware of. As per usual, if you think specifically you need to say something, then please raise that at the point in time.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, can we just have a look at the minutes of the last meeting, which have been circulated? I don't think there's anything on there that I've noted, and I don't think there are any outstanding items that we aren't about to cover with regard to the safety valve. There was one point about the early years sector and whether there's been any communications going to them. Dwayne, is that you or is it somebody else?
Yeah, so sorry. Yes, I've emailed the early years sector and I said when it comes to review of the early years, they'll be totally involved with any workshops or anything like that. But in terms of the children with plans, they didn't have any children in the sector in terms of the workshops.
Okay, thank you very much. Are we all happy with the minutes? Lovely, thank you. So the minutes are approved. We have one item on the agenda today, which is to go through the safety valve update. And Paul, I believe we're coming to you for the update.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll do this really, really quickly because as we're all heavily involved and received a number of briefings and been involved in workshops, etc. I don't think there's too much to draw out that members won't already be aware of. So the paper sets out the key areas that we've developed in cooperation with yourselves and other partners. It gives some outline information about what sort of transformational savings we may be able to make in those areas. That gives us an update on the overall programme as it stands, but specifically this paper was asking you to consider a request from the council to agree a block transfer of funds from the schools budget and from the central school services budget of equivalent to 1% to the High and East block. And at the point of publication of this meeting, we didn't have the collection of responses from schools to that consultation, and because the consultation ended last Friday. Those responses have now been received, collated, and were sent out to members of the forum and all head teachers on Monday through a supplementary paper. So I think it's just worth just spending 2 minutes going through that supplementary paper. So hopefully everyone's got the Annex C supplementary paper it starts off with page 3 there. And just very, very quickly, I'm sure you've had a chance to look at that. We've had a good response rate. Over nearly 60% of schools had replied by the deadline. Of those 22 responses, 23 responses, 21 schools supported that proposal, 2 schools disagreed. So there's an over 90% of schools that have supported that proposal. But you'll see there's a number of comments that have come in from schools as well. So there's been a number of comments where there have been concerns and there's a reluctance to agree it, but it has been decided on balance that schools are supporting that proposal. So, as I said, we will be collating those responses from schools. We will be collating them into different themes, and we'll be giving written responses to each of those themes, and we'll be sending that out to all schools after this meeting as well. So there'll be some specific feedback on those comments that were raised. So I think I don't think there's anything else really to add to this particular paper, other than whether there are any questions on the consultation and the proposals, and then obviously coming back to what sort of recommendation that you as a forum would like to agree.
Okay, I think it's really important that lots of members of this forum have been in lots of briefings and consultations, but this is the public meeting, and this is the formal vote on some key elements of the safety valve, and therefore I do think it's important that questions are asked and we appropriately record responses. So even if it's something you felt has been covered in a briefing but isn't in this paper, please make sure we're asking the questions that we should be. So I will start with Grant.
Thank you, everybody. So in the paper that was circulated under alternative options considered, 4.1, it says that if we don't participate in the safety valve programme, the annual and accumulative deficit of the DSE budget will remain a local responsibility. In section 6.2, however, the Executive Director of Resources says that the requirements of actually meeting this programme will require significant financial contributions from the Council, both to fund the programme of activities identified, etc., etc. And it says, while it's expected the DFE may make available supporting revenue, the majority of these costs will need to be borne by the Council. So it seems to me that it remains a local responsibility, regardless of whether we go onto the safety valve programme or not. So I'd just like to ask, and this might be a political question, and I don't know if we've got any of our political leaders with us, so I'd just like to ask is, how seriously has Bracknell Forest Council considered alternative options? So looking at the statute, there is the option to ask the Secretary of State not to do the safety valve and to continue to fund the deficit of the DSG from other sources. So I'd just like to understand whether the Council has properly considered this as a way of avoiding the massive cuts. By my recommendation, so my calculation, around about a 30% cut in SEN funding over the next 5 or 6 years. Has the Council properly considered alternative options?
Okay, Stuart.
Thank you. And so I'm Stuart McKellar, the Council's Executive Director of Resources I've previously referred to. I think the key point is that the deficit is not currently being funded. There are currently regulations in place which allow the Council effectively to roll forward an overdraft, which is not interest-free. It does cost the Council money to actually service that for a period of time. But as with all overdrafts, there will come a point at which those regulations are removed. And at that point in time, the DFE or the bank manager will require that overdraft to be repaid. So the safety valve programme has been put in place to ensure that there's a planned approach to dealing with that situation, rather than leaving it to the end of the process when the regulations are removed and having effectively a cliff edge situation at that point in time. So the Council has considered a wide range of options, including not participating. Grant is absolutely right that even with our participation in safety, a large part of the financial solution will rest with Bracknell Forest Council. However, not the sole element of that financial solution. And participation in the programme, we believe, will give us access to financial flexibilities that would not otherwise be available to us were we not within the programme, that will help us fund that deficit without an immediate impact on council taxpayers.
Grant, do you want to ask any follow-ups on that?
Well, it's very difficult because some of the information that I might want to use is obviously being in information that is in fact commercially sensitive, and we've been specifically barred from mentioning it. However, the big number that I'm not allowed to mention at the end of this programme that the council will still owe is being largely met through sources other than the DfE. So I don't know whether, Stuart, that's entirely accurate to say that council taxpayers may not be affected. I mean, I'm seeing it is that schools are going to, be paying best part of £1 million over from their budgets over the next 5 years. There's going to be massive cuts in SEN services, and at the end of it, the council still has a massive debt which will not be funded by the DfE. It will be funded through other sources, which I'm not allowed to mention. And the reason for this happening is not because the schools in Bracknell Forest are prolific and having too many HCPs, or the officers of Bracknell Forest Council aren't good at their jobs, or the politicians are not doing the right thing. It is because nationally, SEN is a shambles, and local council funding and SEN funding is a joke. And we are being penalised because of a national programme, and we are being asked to basically hand over cash and disadvantage the most vulnerable pupils in our borough. And I think I've said this in the meeting earlier, I really object to the lack of transparency. This meeting should have happened after all of the information was in the public domain, so that those people who are watching, council taxpayers who are watching, could see the full picture. And I have to say right now, I was actually quite prepared to vote in favour for this. I absolutely will be voting against, because I am not prepared to to impoverish schools. I'm not prepared to cut SEN services, and I'm not prepared to put in jeopardy children with SEN, particularly those with the HCPs. And I'm really sorry, but I actually think this meeting is actually out of order, because we don't and are not allowed to talk about the entirety of the information available to us as representatives, and to councillors and to officers. And I think it's disrespectful to the taxpayers in Bracknell Forest Council.
If I can just come back in briefly in that, Chair, I'm not able to comment on the political elements of what you said. That's entirely your view. I'm a local authority officer. I have to remain completely politically neutral. But the reality is that we need to find a solution to the situation that we face. There are many reasons why we're in that position. We need to find a solution. The safety valve programme is the one that's available to us. It's the one that best protects the council's resources. It does not completely protect the council's resources, but it best protects them. So that's why the members of the executive on Tuesday night this week did agree to submit the proposal. The full details of the proposal will never be in the public domain, because the DfE does not permit them to be. You can look at the DfE's website, which has information about safety valve deals. It is high level. That is the information that will be available for the Bracknell Forest safety valve deal, assuming we can get to that point as well. The DfE chooses to have it that way. That is the rules by which we need to abide.
Thank you very much for that response, and Grant, thank you for your passion, and I think a lot of the points in there that you're making may well be felt by other forum members. I think when we have visited this in the past, we have made reference to exactly those things that you've talked about, that this isn't local authority officers, this is not schools overspending, this is a national system that doesn't work and isn't correctly funded. And the only thing we can do with regard to that in the forum is to note those comments. And I believe Councillor Bailey may be online as our political representative, and to request again that our concerns around SEN funding are relayed and expressed as clearly as possible to people at the DfE and MPs at a national level. And I don't know, Councillor Bailey, because this has come up before, whether you've been able to reflect our concerns to the DfE or to ministers.
I mean, yes, I've listened, as you could imagine, with great interest, all that's been said. I'm very, very aware of the passion expressed very articulately by Grant. I've spoken to other head teachers, so I know he's not alone in saying the things that he said. But we were presented, sadly, this is the only game in town. We were left with no choice. And I'm entirely convinced that local authority officers have bent over backwards to do what they can as quickly as they can, as authoritatively as they can, to come up with this submission to the safety valve DFE. I wish it weren't that case, and certainly Grant will know that I've been lobbying like mad to the Department for Education. I've also drawn this matter to the attention of Bridget Phillipson and the Shadow Secretary of State for Education. I've spoken to the Labour Chair, Annalise Dodds. You know, this is a national problem. I guess it's been coming for a few years now. But the reality is that the executive unanimously approved the safety valve submission because we honestly felt there's no other way of going forward. But we really wholeheartedly endorse everything that Grant has said. I mean, I'm not happy about this or comfortable about this, but there is no choice. And I'm sad. I just wish I could say more than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I have a list of questions or queries, but are there any other hands up from forum members? I don't believe I can see any. Put your hands up as you go through, but I do want just to ask for some points of clarification that may mean amending the recommendations or recording them here to make sure that in the event that these recommendations are voted through this evening, and that is an if, I need to be clear about that prior to the vote, but it is absolutely the forum's intention that this should be reviewed every year in the budget. I understand we're making a decision this evening that lasts for the duration of the forum, but this matter will come back in budget reviews that we do each year. Paul, are you able to confirm that? Or Stuart?
I'm happy to go in on that, Chair. The Schools Forum does have an opportunity to review and vote on the DSG budget in total every year. So I would be absolutely amazed if it's not a key element of it. But you know, at the moment, we have presented in our plan an expectation that the top slice will stay for the duration of the safety valve agreement, which is 6 years. There is, however, a commitment from the council that should the position loosen at any point, then the first thing that we will do, if there's any slack, is to revisit in a positive way for schools the 0.5% transfer.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's a key point to make sure that there is a record of that in the event that the figures improve during the period of safety valve, that it will be a priority that the schools block transfer is reversed as soon as possible. Can I also just have confirmation that or to be clear, that in the event that this recommendation is approved, we are not approving anything beyond the length of the safety valve, i.e. it must come back to forum at the conclusion of the safety valve in 6 years. It cannot just be allowed to run automatically. Can somebody confirm that that is the case?
I can confirm that, Chair, yes.
Thank you very much. I note a comment in the chat from Gronya. She's just requesting, please, that where we have those specific points, she's happy to compile them on our behalf and send a letter to political leaders. So, Grant, I think that's particularly in relation to the points that you've made, that Gronya is offering to reflect those to political leaders on our behalf. Okay. Members, are there any other queries from either private briefings or briefings that we've had that we need to make sure are recorded before we begin to look at the recommendations? Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So in table 5.6, there is some indicative impacts for implementing the intervention. So this is how we're going to balance the in-year deficit. And there are some savings detailed from new specialist resource provision, which of course is going to be dependent upon capital funding from the DFE, which was explained to us is likely to happen but not guaranteed. But the bits I'd just like to ask about the changes to education otherwise than at school, which is showing a £400,000 saving, which I take to mean realistically cuts. Phased introduction of the new banding tool, which for members of the public is how money is allocated to schools for children who have EHCPs. That's a £400,000 saving. That's £400,000 less money going into schools to support children with special educational needs. and then changes to specialist support services, which is a saving of 100,000, although an updated figure that isn't on this paper is significantly higher than that, again, which I fear means cuts to specialist services. So my question is, if I was a parent of an EHCP child in Bracknell Forest, what does the provision for my child in my child's local primary or secondary school, or indeed nursery provision, look like once safety valve and these cuts and these savings are in place?
Thank you, Dwayne.
Yeah, I can come in on that. First of all, first and foremost, children in receipt of education, health and care plans, are important, and they are our most vulnerable group. Grant, in terms of our EOTAS, and I'll start with education otherwise and at school provision. At the moment, as a council, we have a pupil referral unit, College Hall, and we have a tuition service whose needs are being met with children, with very few children's needs are being met there. And ultimately, the best place for children's needs to be met are in school. And we know that, and the evidence tells us that. In terms of our specialist support services, when all the workshops with the head teachers were undertaken, and I think it was a fair process, the feedback we had from head teachers was the services we had in place weren't delivering the impact measures we needed for our children. So they are the main areas we're going to be looking at in terms of the safety valve, to make sure what is in place is fit for purpose and is meeting needs of the children in Bracknell Forest. What we are doing as a council, sorry, can you move to your thing? Sorry, I got an echo on my headset. In terms of the investment the council will be making into the specialist resource provisions and the expertise we expect to be in them resource provisions, then in terms of the services, what we will see is more of the services as an outreach team from our specialist resource provisions. So, in terms of the children's needs being met, I expect, different services, and I expect a different model of services. And what we do need to do as well is capacity build within our schools. We do need to transfer the skills and knowledge and understanding as well in meeting the children's needs. So that model will be delivered. And as I've said in the workshops, I'm more than happy to work with all school leaders in designing the services as we move forward. So in terms of that, that money is coming out to the high needs block. Sorry, can people move their mics? I got terrible feedback. Yeah. So in terms of having our children's needs met, what we want to do is an earlier intervention. At the moment, what we find is that we don't come into schools until we're at crisis point. So what we need to do is make sure we're meeting our children's needs at an earlier pace, which is what we will be doing. We will be looking at the early years provision and making sure that is as robust as it can be. Similarly, with all the services, it was clear some of the messages in terms of the provisions from our school leaders is that the needs you've got in your school, our services are not meeting them needs. So we will have to look at that. We whether there's upskilling our own staff to be able to meet that. And we need to be efficient as well. And Grant, if I'm honest, lots of services are provided to schools by Bracknell Forest come free of charge to schools, where other authorities are trading these services out of the notional 6,000. So in terms of what we're delivering, we want to make sure that it is best value for money, that every penny we spend on these services gives us best outcome for children and young people, and that the skills that they have are being transferred into the workforce within our schools.
Go ahead, Grant.
Thanks, Dwayne. I mean, what I'm hearing is that we're going to have more children with SEN needs in our schools, but less resources to support them. But what you're going to do is we'll have some outreach from the SEN schools, which may not be built or have staffing for some time. And we might have services that are already stretched. I mean, you can't get a speech and language therapist. There aren't enough of them covering Bracknell at the moment. That you can't get extra EP appointments. Occupational health, with children waiting for 18 months, 2 years, and the list goes on. And if we are going to keep children with SEN needs in our schools, and actually I'm in absolute agreement with you, Dwayne, that in lots of cases that is absolutely the right thing. You can't ask schools to do that without external services to support them. You can't ask schools to do that if you're cutting their budgets, which means cutting staff. You can't do that if you're asking us then to trade even more services. Actually, the two things don't go together. We're already under strain, under stress. Staff are leaving because actually SEN is overwhelming us. And actually, you're making it harder. Not you, but this is making it harder for us. And actually, I'm afraid that training, I'm sure there are schools out there that where some training might be appropriate, but I actually feel that's almost insulting, as if like we don't already train our staff about ASD or ADHD and all the other things that we are dealing with. Training is not the answer. Having access to specialists is the answer, to mental health specialists. Need any mental health support in Bracknell Forest? Forget about it. And we're making it harder.
Grant, can I come back on that? Because I have spoke to school leaders since I've been here. And as you know, I've been here a relatively short time. And one of the common themes that has come through from school leaders is that you don't feel you've got the skills and knowledge necessary to meet the demand that's coming through the front door. Now, I understand that. I've been out to schools and I have recognised the level of need in your schools. I can't turn this ship overnight. It's a big ship to turn. What we are doing as a council, and we've recognised that, we are prepared to build an SMH school. We are putting extra capacity in your resource provisions. We are putting extra places in your secondary schools. That's not going to happen overnight, admittedly. We are looking how quickly we can do that. And we are working with the DfE to ensure that we can get this through as quickly as possible to make sure the needs are met. When I spoke to leaders, you told me the teams that are in place are not fit for the needs of the 21st century children that you have there. I agree, the needs are far more complex these days. Children are living longer in terms of prem babies, and they are coming with greater needs. So I need to make sure that the services I've got absolutely are meeting the needs of the population, of the children population in Bracknell Forest. That is not going to happen overnight. But everything I'm doing is in response to feedback and conversations and workshops that I've had with head teachers. I haven't come in and said, this is what you got. What I've asked is that we work together. Yes, children have a right to be taught in their local schools, in their local communities. And that is a presumption in law. That's not me saying it. That's what the law says. Unless, and it should be the minority. If I can stop children being educated in independent, non-maintained specialist school, then we could absolutely wipe out this overspend immediately. The issue I've got at the moment is the children that are there, our local schools are saying they cannot meet these children's needs. So, you know, I'm happy to work with you, Grant, if you can come up with a solution, but we are spending circa £11 million in the independent sector. I want to put that money in schools, but putting that money in schools means you have to take the children's needs. And what you're telling me at the moment is you can't meet them needs because you don't have the skill sets. So I appreciate what you're saying. You feel insulted. I'm only feeding back and responding in terms of what I've been told over the last 6 months since I've been in Bracknell Forest.
Okay, let's move on to some other comments. We can come back. Hands up, please, if you've got any comments. Caroline, please.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Dwayne. And I appreciate that you have been very collaborative and you have reached out to school leaders and we have worked together to try to support everything you're trying to do. I think echoing Grant's concerns, I think my concerns really are that, yes, the needs are increasingly complex. And I feel that the savings, the mitigations that are being talked about are essentially savings. And I guess my other concern is that if this weren't a safety valve restructure of SEN services, I feel quite confident that together we could come up with a package that would serve our children well and our schools well, and would mean that more of our children could be kept in our mainstream schools because the level of provision and the level of training would be specialist enough and precise enough to help us. My overarching worry is that because we are doing this in light of a cost-cutting exercise, which, let's face it, that's what we're doing, we won't get that level of specialist support because we just can't afford it, or the cost will be thrown back on schools again, and that means that children will suffer again. And I get that we all want the best for children, but we have to realise that we're doing this in the context of essentially saving money.
Thank you, Caroline.
Sorry,
Liz, and then we'll take some officer feedback.
It's interesting. So, Dwayne, you'd mentioned about the £11 million that's gone into independent system. I think in all of this, that's my biggest, saddest regret for the children in the borough. And I don't know what assurances I'm still hearing about that. That money has hemorrhaged out of mainstream schools into the specialist system, and actually, would some of that being diverted to training help us? I'm not 100% certain it would do, but the money would have done. Okay, the money to get to the OH, to get the speech and language, to get the counselling, all of the things that we're crying out for. And I just want assurances that every single child that goes off to a specialist placement, that we as mainstream schools have had a chance to see what that money is going for, and that other people have had a chance to bid for that money. I think I feel so passionate about that. I feel that it's. I don't know what the processes were that led to that money hemorrhaging out of mainstream, but it just can't happen. We're all in it together now, but the children are going to suffer for years because of this. And I know that's not because officers won't be doing their jobs and school leaders won't be doing their jobs, but that decision to not block that money going out is going to impact children for years. And that's the sad reality.
Yeah.
Dwayne.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I know people talk about savings. I'm not saving money. The local authority not saving money. We are spending nearly £9 million every year more than we got coming in. So we haven't got a saving pot and we spend it on something else. We are actually trying to live within our means. And we do have a disproportionate amount of children for the size of this authority in the independent sector. However, the biggest cliff edge is year 6 to 7. Yeah. And what I will say is that as local authority officers and team, we do come out to schools and we do consult. Yeah, and we're happy to have conversations. Absolutely. But when we're told no and no again, and by the time the parents get fed up, then we have no defence in court whatsoever, and then we just can't go. We have to place. So this isn't about a massive spend out. It's about absolutely us working together, and all of us signing up to meeting our children's needs. And lots of children that are going into the independent sector are year 7 children. And that's the data. That's not me giving you that. That is what the data is telling me. So I think there is a conversation, Liz. That money would be better served in our local schools, in our local communities. Absolutely. But it can only be achieved if we all work together to achieve that outcome. And for me, that also has a positive effect on the climate, because the children are not being transported in taxis out of county. And it always has another effect then on the school, on the transport for costs as well. So the benefits of keeping children locally is absolutely overwhelming. But ultimately, we can have this conversation, but we have to work together, because I can't change this on my own. It has to be all of us taking a hit and a fair share of the children, and making sure that every school steps up to the plate.
Dwayne, just before I come back to Grant, I think my concern here, and particularly about the recommendations that we'll come to shortly, is that we're being asked to vote through cuts to school budgets, and we're being asked to support a reduction in the amount of money being spent on SEN. And as school leaders and those that work with children, including officers, of course, that feels very, very uncomfortable. And I don't want in any way should this be voted through, for it to be a positive affirmation of safety valve, as if this is a good thing, because what this is the least worst option. And if we're going to vote for it, I think it's very important that we know that this is what we believe might be the least worst option, not something that we think is a good idea or may have significant positives. And I just, for the minutes, want to make it clear that schools' indicative budget increase next year in Bracknell is, I believe, 1.7% before this top slice. So schools are going to be in an incredibly difficult position before safety valve, and safety valve is going to make that position more difficult. So I think we just need some honesty out there that whilst this might be the least worst option, and we know you're working with us, this isn't a good thing for the children in our borough. This will have impacts on school staff and the children in the borough. And I think it's just important that we note that, because the wording of support the proposal bothers me slightly. Grant, sorry.
Yeah, so I think actually just echoing what you said, Stuart, and in fact, I'm very aware that the council executive met yesterday to talk about this, and I'm actually interested to know whether officers can answer, or maybe Councillor Bailey can. What is the actual annual reduction in SEN spending over the next 5 years per year? So how much less money will we be spending on SEN than we are now over the next 5 years? So I just want to be really clear. We are making cuts. We're not spending. There might be some spending, but overall, there are cuts to services and cuts to funding. So I just wonder how much less money per year are we spending on SEN over the next 5 to 7 years? I had one other thing I'd like to say.
Okay, Paul, is that one for you? Are you able to put a figure on that?
I can start off with it. Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's already been said, and it's in the report, that we're overspending our grant allocation by £9 million a year on high needs, supporting children with high needs. Part of this programme is reducing that money, but it's by using that more effectively in a more cost efficient way than we are at the moment. So we're still hoping to achieve the requirements, the levels of support the children need, but by spending that, ceasing that £11 million, or a big chunk of that £11 million going out into independent non-maintained sector schools, and spending that in in-borough provisions, particularly the new special schools, the SRPs, maybe more children in mainstream settings as well, through inclusion and that sort of stuff. That's a different way of spending the money. It's not necessarily saying there's going to be worse outcomes, it's just spending it more efficiently. But yes, there is the proposal is to move within our income. Our expenditure matches our income, and at the moment our expenditure is £9 million above our income.
Okay, so overall there will be eventually a £9 million cut to SEN funding.
We'll be spending it at the level of income we get, Grant. Yeah.
Okay. So that will have real impact on schools, real impact on children, real impact on families. I think we just need to be really clear about that. I think Stuart articulated it. The other thing I just picked up, Stuart, you said about it's the only option. What actually occurred to me that when you said that is that in another forum, I am an elected parish councillor in Warfield, and actually if I was sitting in this position, I might take independent advice. And actually I'm very aware that although I have worked with some of the officers on this call for a decade and know them to be very honourable, professional people, actually the only advice we've got is from Bracknell Forest Council. And actually, I don't know, is it the only option? I'm still not entirely convinced. I know that it is. We've obviously not got the option for independent advice, perhaps, and maybe that's something that we as a group of schools or FAB or unions ought to have done. But I just reflected that we're being told it's the only option. There is no choice. But actually, I don't know whether I'm confident that that is the case, and that isn't meant to impugn any officer here. It makes me realise that actually in other forums we would have sought independent advice to make sure that we were getting every option available to us, and maybe not just one voice.
Is there an officer that's able to address that?
Sorry, I'm now unmuted. If I can address it in a less than direct way, perhaps. So 35 local authorities with education responsibilities have already signed safety valve agreements. Bratton Forest is one of 5 who are going through the safety valve process this year. I'm not aware of any local authority that has been invited to join safety valve that has not participated in it.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other queries or questions or comments that we can raise now before we move to the recommendations? That won't mean we're closing down comments, but if we can get to the recommendations, we can go through them individually. I can't see any hands up. I do just want to reiterate that point, that as we make a decision about these recommendations, that anybody on this call is doing so with great concern about this issue nationally, about the level of funding coming into schools and the scale of the cut reduction, however we're going to word it, that has got to be in place, no matter how carefully we do it. So if I can come to the recommendations, Paul, can I ask you to put the wording on the screen, just so everybody is absolutely clear about what we are voting on? And as you are doing that, I'll come back to the bit I said at the beginning, that it's a requirement of safety valve to be able to collate how various different groups on the forum are voting. And so this will be, we will be asking members to vote individually on each of these recommendations. So Paul, if my understanding is correct, the first 2.3 that we can see was the original recommendation that was written prior to the information coming in about the consultation that's highlighted on the screen now. But following the paper that has been submitted with the outcome of the consultation, we are looking at that lower section now highlighted 2.3 and 2.4. Are there any members that want to comment? And I'm just going to give you some time as I'm filling to read those recommendations. If there are members as you're reading that are thinking there's something there that needs to be changed or reworded, members have seen this, but we've not seen this with as much time as we normally would. So would anybody like to comment on the wording of the recommendations before we come to a vote? Keith.
Referring to your point just a few minutes ago, I don't like the opening of 2.4 in support of. I think that does sound too positive.
Would we rather reluctantly accept, or Paul, I don't know if there's a requirement of this is a legal wording, but I absolutely agree with what Keith says, that
Chairman, if I may come in, I don't think you need the words in support of recommendation 2.3. The recommendation is simply that the schools forum agrees that the council request a formal approval of the Secretary of State.
Okay, I think that certainly sounds less positive. Keith, do you think, are you happy that that addresses that concern?
Yeah, you've seen how my school's responded to the consultation.
Yeah,
the schools forum forms part of local government nationally. It's part of the machinery of government, and part of me is also thinking, is there something to be served by a vote that isn't unanimous here? Not that it would send any message that would be heard by anyone in power anyway at the moment, but I am wrestling with this, wrestled with the consultation, but everyone's wrestled with this. Forced to accept, I've just seen in the chat.
I'm not sure as elected members we can vote for forced to accept, but I do think certainly for anybody who may be watching online, the massive unease that members feel with this. But yes, I think that's an appropriate adjustment. Are there any other comments on wording before I come to a vote? And I will do this in two parts. So I'll do 2.3 and then I'll do 2.4. Paula, we've got to vote separately on each of those items, I assume. It's
entirely up to you, Stuart. If you feel that you want to do it that way, that's fine. Whatever you think is the most
actually
appropriate.
as I'm reading it, and other members jump in, the two are too closely linked. I don't think you can vote differently for each one, and therefore it seems to make sense actually to do both 2.3 and 2.4 with one vote. I don't think you can vote yes to one and no to the other. Any comments on that before we move to a vote? In that case, I am asking if our Schools Forum members accept item 2.3 and item 2.4. My name is the first one on the list, and I will be voting to accept, and I'll accept with great reluctance, and my belief that there is no other alternative in the circumstances. So I vote to accept. Liz Savage.
I'm reluctant to accept, but I will.
Okay, so that is an accept. Jenny Baker.
I'm reluctant to accept again, but I will.
Okay, thank you. Sue Butler, I believe, has given apologies. Stuart Bevan. I can't see Stuart in the chat, in the list actually. So I will move to Caroline Johnson.
With quite considerable fears for the future, reluctantly accept.
Okay, thank you. Juanita Dunlop.
Same support.
Thank you. Trudy Salmons.
Yeah, accept.
Thank you. Keith Granger.
Yeah, reluctantly.
Thank you. Tim Griffith.
Yeah, same, reluctantly accept, Stuart.
Thank you. Grant Strudley.
I vote no.
Okay, thank you, Grant. Gareth Croxon.
I accept.
Thank you. Katie Moore.
I accept reluctantly.
Thank you. Paul Tatum.
As a representative of the NEU, I vote no.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I believe I have asked for all of the voting members. Is there anybody I've missed in that roll call? Okay, so with reluctance, we are accepting 2.3 and 2.4 with 2 dissents to that decision.
Stuart, could it be noted the decision was not unanimous as well?
Yeah, please, yeah.
I think that's important.
Yeah. Okay, so it has been accepted, but it was not a unanimous decision. And we'll make sure that's reflected in the minutes. It brings us to the end of the meeting, and it feels like a bit of a somber and sad occasion that educators have been put in a position where we feel we've had to vote through cuts to our schools. But that is what has happened this afternoon, and certainly there'll be a commitment from this forum and all the members on here to ensure that this process is done, minimising the impact on the children in our borough. I do think it's worth noting some thanks before we move on, because along with forum members, I think local officers have been put in a very difficult position and have been required to work at great pace to produce these recommendations, and have done their best to involve schools in that process. So my thanks to our local authority officers. I also want to thank our forum members and our heads reps who have, as head teachers, had to attend an awful lot of meetings, but I know there's an awful lot of you that have given hours and hours to try and ensure that we mitigate and reduce the impact of of this process and to do it as positively as we can. So I'd also like to note my thanks to that. I certainly know our heads reps who are not members of the forums have come along to support us this evening. So my thanks to everybody involved. The only item remaining is the date of the next meeting, which comes around remarkably quickly, which is the 11th of January. Are there any other items? Juanita.
Sorry, I did just to ask the SEND department to put all to try as hard as possible to make sure that these places within these schools go towards children within the borough. So I would like that sort of notice somewhere that these schools are giving money towards it, and we would like the SEN department to put a lot of effort into this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a good point. And there are some comments coming through in the chat that I'm not sure can be picked up, but I think Councillor Bailey has written there that he's heard everything that's been said and is grateful for the passion and candour, and Gronya also just echoing some thanks to the commitment to the discussions that have taken place. So unless there is any other business, Juanita, your hands up. Is that the same point? Sorry, yeah, okay. I can't see any other hands up. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Have a good Christmas. See you in January. Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.